So hello, everybody. It's 5:30, so we'll go ahead and get started since our guests are already hard at work. I'd like to welcome everybody to this evening's presentation. It's thrilling to see so many people. We weren't sure how many people to expect, so this is really exciting to see everybody. So for those who don't know me, I'm Glenn Wally, Associate Professor of Japanese Literature in the Department of East Asian Languages and Literatures. So I'm sort of MC, at least for the first part of tonight. So I'd like to begin with a few acknowledgments, and then a brief explanation of the art form that we'll be exploring this evening, Senja Fuda, or votive slips. Finally, I'll introduce the artists that we're here to learn from, and I will keep my remarks brief because I, along with everybody else, want to see what they're doing. So tonight's event was planned and organized by Kevin McDowell, Japanese Studies librarian, and Kumiko McDowell, Japanese, thank you, yes. And Kumiko McDowell, who is Japanese cataloger and metadata technician at the University of Oregon Libraries. Kumiko is also a PhD candidate in EO. Tonight's event is made possible thanks to generous funding from the Gordon W. Gilkey Endowed Fund, the Center for Asian and Pacific Studies, the Admiral David E. Jeremiah and Mrs. Connie Jeremiah Lecture Series, the Yoko McLean Lecture Series, and the University of Oregon Libraries. In particular, we'd like to highlight the role of the University of Oregon's Special Collections and University Archives, which holds one of the largest collections of Senja Fuda, the materials that we'll be talking about tonight, in the world, along with many other rare and valuable collections, including the papers of authors such as Ken Kesey and Ursula Le Guin, politicians and thought leaders, including Senator Wayne Morse and suffragette Abigail Scott Duniway, and the records of utopian communities, the women's Back to the Land movement, and collections that document the history and culture of Oregon. Senja Fuda, sometimes called nosatsu, and in English often called votive slips, are a kind of woodblock print that dates back to the Edo or early modern period, in this case, the 18th century. This means that they're made using the same techniques and materials used to make the famous ukiyo-e prints you're probably all familiar with. They're still being printed today using the same techniques and materials by artisans, through whose hands these techniques have been passed for generation after generation, culminating in the three artists who have joined us today. What sets Senja Fuda apart from other woodblock prints is the fascinating subculture that surrounds them, a subculture that began in the late 18th century and continues today, and that encompasses religious pilgrimage, social networking, and self-representation through art. So at their most basic, Senja Fuda are small slips of paper that a pilgrim will paste on a wall or other surface at a temple or shrine. So I took this photograph at Kanda Shrine in downtown Tokyo a couple years ago. The slip of paper always has the pilgrim's name, or actually a pseudonym known as a daime, and often the pilgrim's hometown or neighborhood and a logo of some sort. Historically, the daime or pseudonym was thought by pastors to act as the worshiper's proxy. By leaving your name at or on the shrine or temple, it's like you're staying there yourself, holding a prayer vigil. This practice still has its adherents today, and it's not uncommon to see religious buildings festooned with votive slips, even though the practice is usually forbidden. The practice of pasting slips began in the late 18th century and thrived throughout the 19th century. Here we see a mid-19th century image of pastors doing their thing. That long pole that the guy on the left has is a special tool that Senja Fuda people developed to paste their slips in out-of-the-way places. There's another guy writing his name directly on the red gate, and he's engaging in what was considered an extreme form of Senja Fuda practice, which just dispenses with the slips altogether and sort of enacts graffiti on the walls. In addition to the worship aspect, there's clearly an aspect of play, of recreation to this. It's a leisurely afternoon out, plus you get the competition of trying to paste your slip in the hardest to reach place, which makes it hardest for shrine personnel to remove and gets your name there forever. Slips were also exchanged. At first, they were traded by pastors when they ran into other pastors out in the field, something like business cards, but soon they became objects of collection. Meetings came to be held, like this one, at which individual pastors, or more often clubs of pastors, would exchange slips. From here, it was just a short jump to the second major dimension of Senja Fuda culture. Slips came to be printed especially for exchange with no intention of ever pasting them on a wall. They began to be printed in color, and the design elements turned into illustrations like this one. designs could expand over multiple slips. This is actually a senjafuda, as are the images that I've been showing you. Motifs could recur on a number of slips, printed as a set or a series, sponsored by a club. Senjafuda for exchange can be thought of as a more plebeian version of something called the surimono that some of you may know, in that they were woodblock prints illustrated and executed by masters of the form, including such famous artists as Kuniyoshi and Hiroshige, but they were privately commissioned, carrying motifs and messages that made most sense for the subculture for which they were made. Senjafuda have survived through the 19th, 20th, and into the 21st century as both an art form and a subculture of pasting, trading, and collecting. But of course, the significance has changed over time. So originally, they represented kind of an up-to-date aesthetic. Early 19th century people celebrating the activities and designs that felt modern and meaningful to them. In modern practice, senjafuda creators and collectors have used them as a way to preserve a sense of continuity with the past. Not only are senjafuda still created using traditional materials and techniques, they almost always express a design aesthetic shaped by that of the Edo period. The result is more than mere nostalgia. It's a determined statement about things that have refused to disappear in Japan's tumultuous modern centuries. These slips, for example, are just random ones that I picked up a few years ago at the Suihirote, a theater in Tokyo that hosts performances of rakugo, a traditional performing art centered on comic storytelling. Like senjafuda, rakugo emphasizes its roots in the past as well as its validity in the present. It's only natural that each of these arts would ally itself with the other. Together, they make a powerful statement about the continued presence of Edo lifeways in contemporary Japan. So without further ado, let me introduce our guests. We have 3 guests with us. First, we have Matsuzaki Keizaburo. Matsuzaki-san, ちょっと手を挙げてください. He's hard at work. Matsuzaki-san. Hi. He began training as a woodblock printer in 1952. He went independent in 1956. He, since 1988, has been an intangible cultural property of Arakawa-ku in Tokyo. He has received from the government the Order of the Sacred Treasure Silver Rays, and he has been designated a traditional craftsman by the Minister of Economy, Trade, and Industry. So please welcome Matsuzaki Keizaburo, first of all. Assisting him will be Suda-san, Suda Ayumi, who began training under Matsuzaki Keizaburo in 2014. She went independent in 2020. She prints a wide variety of materials ranging from ceremonial envelopes and stationery to anime-related woodblock prints, which should tantalize a lot of you. I'm very tantalized. So please welcome Suda Ayumi. So they are both printers, and we also have Nagai Sayeko, who is our woodblock cutter this evening. She graduated from the Traditional Arts School of Kyoto and then began training as a woodblock cutter in 2010 with Sekioka Yusuke, who is also an Arakawa-ku intangible cultural property. She went independent in 2016, and she cuts blocks for a wide variety of materials ranging from new and traditional ukiyo-e to recreations of classic works to prints associated with rock bands and anime, and I really want to see someone for work for rock bands. I think it includes Kiss. Very interesting. So please welcome Nagai Sayeko as well. And now I'm going to turn over the microphone to Akiko Wally, Associate Professor of Japanese Art History, who will be sort of conducting us through discussion and observation and Q&A with our artisans. So take it away, Akiko.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Professor Wally, the other Professor Wally, Glenn, for that wonderful presentation. So we will take a moment to switch the screen from the PowerPoint to live stream so that we have that on the screen as well. So just a moment. There you go. So welcome, everyone. So what we are going to do is just like Glenn mentioned, we're going to be a little bit casual and open, and we will have live streaming. But for us who are here, the the perks of being here is to be able to see the carving and printing in person. So a couple of things to note before we get into it. We have two cameras right in front, and you could probably see the black tape. So we would like to ask, please not to go inside the tape so that we're not blocking the camera for live streaming. And it seems like there are like 20-second delay, yeah, for the streaming. So it might be a little bit strange feeling, but this is our way to give a sense of close-up on the screen. But what I thought we could start by doing is to give everybody an opportunity to kind of meditate on what is going on, either on the screen or maybe take turn, and if you would like to come up and take a look closely, please, you're welcome to do so. And after that, we will start Q&A. So please go ahead. Taking a photograph is totally no problem, but please make sure to not use flash. Thank you.
Please don't hesitate to come up and take a look. This may be your only chance.
Okay, so now that everybody had a little bit of chance to meditate on what's going on, maybe we can start with the Q&A. I know there is a question.
Oh. Oh my God, okay. Testing. Oh my God. All right, I was just wondering how do you continuously draw all of the really intricate details on each block?
So your question is how she. Yeah. こう色刷りをするときに、何枚、版を作る必要があるんですかっていうでそれぞれをやらなくちゃいけないんですよね大変ですよねっていう。いや。Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so the question really was about the color block and key block. So for color woodblock printing, the rule of thumb is you basically need one block per color. And Nagai-san was showing examples. First, these are the ones that they created specifically for this occasion that has the Oregon name. And this is just 4 blocks. So one key block, which is the outline black line block, and then color block. And this very, very famous Great Wave by Katsushika Hokusai. So this one was 8? 9. So this is 9 blocks. But for this one, which is a very intricate image, this is 32. Oh my God. Yeah.
Can you ask which block she's on now?
Yeah. And for, in some cases, when the colors are separate enough, you could do 2 colors or multiple colors on one block, and that is one way to save blocks. And so, 次の質問は、今彫っていらっしゃるのは何ですかっていうことですね。
何枚目ですか？
So this is the key block, which is the outline block, and that is the block that is done at the beginning stage. It's black, yeah. But for the Hokusai one, for those of you who are in 209, you might remember that for Hokusai's Great Wave, the initial idea was to do all the key block line also using Berlin blue. So that was blue. So it does not necessarily have to be black, but in most cases it is. And the key block is the most important block because that is the one used for proofing the color. So that is, so the way that blocks are carved is for underdrawing to be pasted onto the block upside down, like facing down, and then you carve through the drawing. So once the key block is done, the first initial drawing is destroyed. So for every subsequent color block, you have to use the printed key block line to create the color block.
So there was a question from a gentleman in the audience, which I will relay, and then she can translate. So this is for Matsuzaki-san about the printing. It seems like the colors dry really quickly, that he's able to print one color and then very quickly print the next color on there. And we always had the image that people were hanging them up with clotheslines for like a day or two, but do they really dry that quickly?
須田さん、すりについての質問です。でこう見ていると、顔料がとっても早く乾いてしまうような感じに見えるんですけれども、はい、なんかこうイメージ的には一色吸ったらちょっと乾かしてみたいなそういう感じなんですけど、そんなことしなくていいんでしょうか？
全く必要ないです。今吸っているものなんですけれども、示してあるんですね。向こうの親方が吸っているものなんですけれども、絵の具が染みやすいように一定の湿度を保つっていうのが紙の方の重要なポイントなんですけれども、示していることによって紙の繊維の奥まで染み込んでいくので、そこからはもう出ていかない。抜けられない。
So no, you don't need to dry the paper for each printing because you may be able to tell a little bit, but the paper is actually damp. And by damping the paper, the color will sink deep into the fiber of the paper. And once they are sunk deep into the fiber, they're actually locked into it. So the color will not come out, even if you do the next printing immediately. So that's why the printing pad that the Matsuzaki sensei is using, you have to print really, really hard to really make the pigment sink in. Okay.
How do they get the fade effect?
Oh, you mean the gradation? Like, yeah. ぼかしはどのようにするんでしょうか？
はい、ぼかしはですね、刷毛、刷毛でこちら側に絵の具をつけて、こちら側を水でつけて、で絵の具と水で半面でこすって、ここの間をぼかして、それをグラデーションにして鳴らす。
So the question was about how to do the gradation effect. And so you would put the pigment on one half of the brush, and water on the other half. And by using the brush, you will blend basically the water and the pigment at the middle, and that creates the gradation effect. Yeah.
Since we have two microphones, I can go out in the audience for questions. So since we have two microphones, I can start going out in the audience to hear questions. But I see a couple of hands up here first. So Lee?
Is pasting a devotional or a religious thing, or is it just done for fun?
Go ahead, because I'm going to
Should I just answer that? Okay, so I'll just take that one since we've been studying sensitivity here. So pasting them, probably a little bit of both. So it can still have this aspect of pilgrimage, of devotion, but since there's also a lot of enjoyment to be had in it, it's probably up to the individual person, the meaning they find in it. And it was probably that way even back in the 18th and 19th century. There was probably not a strict delineation between an act of worship and an act of recreation. And so people were probably getting both values out of it. And then probably the same thing for collectors. You know, we have some albums in the collection that clearly people are collecting these as art objects, but the very first thing that's pasted in the front is, for example, a mandala connected with a particular sect of Buddhism. So there's clearly some sort of religious feeling going on, and these are from albums that are made in the 1970s and 80s. So.
Is there any time that you can't use the blocks? Like, what is the period of time in which you can continuously print on the blocks for?
永井さん、これは永井さんへの質問です。版木っていうのはどのぐらいの長さ、どのぐらいの期間使えるものなんでしょうかっていうことなんですが。っていうか、期間、何枚ぐらいすれるかとか。Yeah, so it's not really about the wood itself, but it's more about printing. So for really famous series like the Great Wave, in Edo period, there were thousands of prints that were produced. And once that happens, then the line starts to get dull because you will be pressing down on the line, right? The sharp line will become dull and thick. So that's sort of how one might gauge the lifespan of a woodblock. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. So, っていうか、それってどのぐらいの期間にでも so it's about the number of prints you make, right? So if you do it every day and make 2,000 prints in 2 days, then that's the time span, right? The
Yes, you're saying that you could do about 2,000 to 3,000
2,000 to 3,000.
prints on one block before the block started to wear away and lose some of the detail?
Is that what your question was about? Yeah?
Yeah. Hands, let's see.
Careful, don't go in front of the camera.
Well, I just have a very simple question. What kind of paper do they use? What kind of materials in it?
紙はどのような紙を使うんでしょうか？
基本的には一番いい紙で木月宝書という和紙の一種なんですけれども、それを使っています。ただですね、楮紙って言って木の皮を使っているので、その木のくずが入ってしまうと、紙の中に入ってしまうと、それが傷になってしまうので、それを全部取らなきゃいけないんですね。それが大変なんですけど、一番いい紙はもう真っ白というか木のくずがない紙で、どんどん質の下がっていくと、ちょっとそういうくずがいっぱい入ってしまっている紙とかもあります。
So basically it's mulberry paper, but you can't just use any kind of mulberry paper. And the highest of the high grade paper has no mixed in wood, pieces. Yeah, fibers, pieces, right? And if the paper has all these little pieces of wood, then unless you take them out, that becomes the sort of the scratchy, right, or break in the line. So when you once get a paper, you have to make sure that all of those little pieces are taken out. But the highest of the high quality mulberry paper will have none of that. So it's pure white paper. Yes.
Traditionally versus modern, what kind of paint is used? Is it acrylic or?
顔料は昔と今で違いがあるんでしょうか？
さすがに昔の顔料っていうのは自然素材なので、それはだいぶ減っています。で、一番浮世絵が全盛だった技術的に高かったのは、大正から昭和ぐらいの頃なんですけれども、その絵の具もだんだんなくなってきていて、どうしても浮世絵だけじゃ絵の具屋さんも食べていけないので、いろんなところで使っていただかないとどんどん製造をしなくなっていくので、今もどんどんこの絵の具がなくなってるっていうのは多いです。
So in the olden days, for instance, in the Edo period, it was all natural materials, so organic and mineral pigments. But those are less and less frequently used. And the height of these woodblock printing was around the Taisho into Showa period, so early part of the 20th century. And the pigments that were used at that time are no longer available too. Many of them are no longer available. So the industry is really having to sort of cater to different kind of printing technique and different kind of users. So even today, there are like pigment that was available last year, they're not available this year, so it's really a struggle. Yeah.
Similar question, but about the wood blocks. What are they typically made out of, and what traditionally have they been? What kind of wood were they?
永井さん、版木について教えてくださいということです。どのような、材料なんでしょうか？
浮世絵に使うのは基本的に山桜の板のみです。粘りがあって、硬さもあって、彫りやすいっていうのもあるんですけど、何よりその細かく彫った線が、1000枚2000枚すっても耐えられるっていうのがおそらく唯一山桜の木ですね。ソメイヨシノとかではダメです。山桜に限ります。
So, in the past and even today, the primary material for woodblock is mountain cherry, and that is a really hard wood, but it also has this sort of resilience. So you can carve, some of the lines are really fine lines, right? You can carve those fine lines, but also the wood can sustain thousands of printing, like 1,000, 2,000 printing, and you can still, the wood can survive it. Yeah. じゃあ、彫るのは大変なんですかっていう彫るのは大変なんでしょうか？
みんな彫り師はここに力が入るんで豆ができるんで太さが全然こっちに入る指はこっち入りませんっていう感じ。
So yes, so the question was, is it then hard to carve? And the response is yes. So, so for all carvers, because you get blisters, right? On one hand, the kind of the size of your fingers will differ quite dramatically between hands. So a ring that can fit on your, for instance, left-hand hand might not fit on your right hand. Yeah. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
What does training for a wood carver look like? Like, how long is the process, and what level do you start at, and how do you get to where you are now?
どのような、彫り師になるにはどのような鍛錬をなさるんでしょうか？でいつ頃始めるのかとか、どういう経験を、どういうことを学ぶのかとかっていうことです。
彫りはすりも彫りもですけど、この世界は必ず、弟子入りという形で親方のもとについて、大体5、6年、そうですね、そのくらい修行をします。で、彫りの場合はなんかこうくねくねした線とかを彫るところから始めて、であとは細かくない仕事、力仕事とかを徐々に手伝って、で最終的には浮世絵と美人画、これが一通り彫れるようになると、お前も一人前だみたいな感じで卒業っていう形ですね。でそうすると一人で独立ができます。
浮世絵と美人画っていうのはその違いをどういうふうに？
その彫りで一番難しいって言われてるのが、いわゆる毛割りって言われるこの昔は1ミリの間に 何本とかいう
あ
そうですね。でそれが一番難しいんで、浮世絵といってもこれは比較的多分5年ぐらいでも彫れますと。ただやっぱ毛割りとかになるとすごい切れる小刀と、腕も必要なんで、ちょっとなかなか最初は難しいんで失敗繰り返しながらもなんとか最終的には美人画ができるようにっていうことですね。はい。
So, in terms of training to become a carver, so both carver and printer, if you would like to become professional, you have to first apprentice to a professional. And what you will do is you spend about 5 to 6 years, sometimes a little longer, training under a professional, your mentor. Then first, you will start with, sort of practicing curvy lines, and then you will do things that are not really detailed, but large space and something that really requires a lot of strength. And then you will gradually start to do things that are a little bit more complex and detailed. And what Nagai-san was just saying is for something like the Great Wave, it's not as complex, so you could probably do it after 5 to 6 years. But the most difficult would be the beauty prints, and especially the hairline. And so for hair, you need a lot of skills, but also sharp knife. So once you get to the point that you can do that, then you are sort of graduated and you can be independent. Yeah.
So then what does she do first? What does she do first? If the face is the easiest messed up on, does she do that first and then decide later whether it's good quality enough to move on?
So is it are you asking about what will be the test or something? Priorities.
Yeah, like when you're doing a new block,
Uh-huh.
you start with the face.
まずこう彫るときにどこから彫り始めるんでしょうかっていうことかな。
例えば顔が一番難しかったら顔で失敗したら終わりだから顔から始めるか、それとも顔のところから始めるか。
基本的には
マイク
基本的には手前からっていう、一応ルールがありますけど、で当然やっぱ顔を最後に残しちゃうと失敗した時にどうにもなんないので、人によりますけどやっぱ、集中できる時間、静かな邪魔の入らない時間にやるっていうのはやっぱ細かいところをやりますっていうのはあります。で、こう例えば北斎の点々点々点々ずっと点々点みたいのを彫るのは嫌なのでちょっとちょっとこっち彫ったりとかもしますし、私の場合は、集中するところは必ず朝一にしてます。夜だともう眠くなっちゃうので、人によります。
Yeah, so it really depends on the person, and there is a loose rule of thumb to start from the place that is closer to you and then move. But you're absolutely right that if you leave the face to the end and you screw it up, then that's your block is ruined. So what Nagai-san does is to save the difficult part to the time that she can have non-distracted time or she can concentrate. And for Nagai-san, it's early morning. And for Hokusai's piece, the really tiny part, dot, that could be a little bit, intense. So she may do a little bit of that and then go to another part. So it really depends. Yes?
What's been your favorite woodblock print to work on or create?
一番好きだった作品っていうのはどんな作品でしょうか？
仕事でやったものはまた別なので、仕事でやると仕事に見えちゃうので、あれなんですけど、ただちっちゃなものでも大きな浮世絵とかでも猫好きなので、猫だけはワクワクして。
I see. So, it's a little bit different to do it as work professionally and to do, to have things that one likes, right? So once it becomes work, then it's just work. So that's a little tough, but personally, I like cats, so everything that has cats in it, I'm usually pretty excited and do it. Yeah. Oh, sorry. What? Yeah.
Sorry, we have somebody.
千社風って全国に同じスタイルでしょうか。例えば地方によって色、形、彫り方違いますか。
日本語の答え。
So is there variation around the country in the style of Senjafuda, like the form or the color or the motif?
基本的にその彫り方、刷り方は一緒です。でただ、京都とかあっちの方に行くとやっぱりなんていうんだろう、好みが違うんで雰囲気とかが絵柄とかが変わってたりっていうのもあるんですけど、今でもやってないか。ほとんど今はもう多分東京でしか作られていないですね。そっか。京都だと芸者さんの小札が残ってたりはします。
So, in terms of technique, how to carve and how to print, it's the same everywhere. But in terms of the general taste, there might be a difference between, for instance, Tokyo and Kyoto. And there are not too many senjafuda printed in Kyoto anymore. But the ones that are still printed are for the sort of the name cards for courtesans, yeah, or geisha in Kyoto. So they still use those as kind of a business card. Yeah.
Okay, mine is a multiple question in one. What was the attraction? What prompted her to start the apprenticeship, and how old was she when she? How many years has she been doing this now?
もう少し彫り師になろうと思った経緯についてとか、今どのぐらいやってらっしゃるのかとか教えてください。ほんのちょっとですよね。だからもう少し。仏像のお話とかなんか。そうですそうです。
もともとその京都の専門学校で仏像を彫ってみたいと思って仏像を彫ったんですけど、立体仏を彫れないという能力の限界を感じまして諦めて東京に帰ろうと。でそのタイミングで平面を彫る仕事が、木版画の仕事あるけどやってみたらっていうとても運よく声がかかって、で、その先輩のつてで私の指示した親方のところに入ることができました。なので私は、ちょっと恥ずかしながら浮世絵とか絵とか全然知らない、興味もあんまりないまんま、ただ彫れるみたいだからいいかなと思って今の仕事に就いて、で、一応14年ぐらいになります。
So Nagai-san has a very interesting profile. So Nagai-san started in a school in Kyoto, wanting to carve Buddhist sculpture. So that was her initial love with carving. But once she entered the school and started doing, she realized that three-dimensional object was not quite for her. And so she was originally from Tokyo, so she decided to return to Tokyo. And at that timing, she had a connection, and the person sort of invited her to create woodblock print and become a wood carver. So she was thinking, if I could carve, then that's great. And so that's how she got into the woodblock print carving. So she says, very humbly, that at the beginning she did not know anything about ukiyo-e or anything about prints. So she was really coming in from the technical side, and she has been doing it for 14 years. Yeah.
Can we ask the same question to Suda-san? どのようなきっかけで始めたんですか？
お気遣いありがとうございます。それも面白いな。 私は基本的には、一度仕事をしていて社会に出てから、浮世絵にどっぷりはまってしまって、そこから、ちょっと、中の文字が読みたくなりまして、で崩し字っていう文字を読みに大学の方に普通の歴史の大学の方に行きまして、そこを卒業してから、やっぱりちょっと浮世絵に関連することを何かしたいなと思った時に、博物館の、こういう体験ですね、刷りの体験を企画運営するボランティアの方に、応募しまして、それでいろんなところで体験をするのに、いろんなところで、浮世絵の刷りをやっているところを行ってるうちにですね、そのボランティアの仲間の中に荒川区の区役所の方がいらっしゃって、その方から、うちの区にこういう職人さんがいるよという形で松崎親方を紹介していただいて、でボランティアで講師をしていただいたりなんだりしているのはもっと10年以上お付き合いをした後に、私の仕事の関係でちょっと間を空いた時に親方のところでちょっと修行をさせてくださいってお願いをして、そこからちょうど親方が本気でやる気があるんだったら受け入れるよっていうふうに言ってくれたので、そこから修行を始めることになりました。
So for Suda-san, it's also another wonderful story, but in a way it's coming from the opposite spectrum. So Suda-san had another work, day job, but she really got into ukiyo-e, woodblock prints. So she wanted to learn about them, and she also wanted to read what the writing says. And the writing for ukiyo-e is cursive writing that is very, very difficult, even for somebody who is a native user of Japanese today. So she went back to university and learned history and learned about ukiyo-e. And after she graduated, she started volunteering at Edo Tokyo Museum, it's Edo Tokyo, it's in Tokyo, sort of organizing sort of experiential workshops, printing, woodblock printing. And after she was doing, that, she got to meet an officer from the Arakawa Prefectural Bureau, and that's where Matsuzaki-san lives. He lives in Arakawa Prefecture. And that's how they met. And at the beginning, Suda-san was inviting Matsuzaki-san to do that workshop. And after about 10 years or so, there was a little bit of a break in the daytime work. So Suda-san asked Matsuzaki-sensei whether or not she can come and apprentice with him. And at that time, he said, if you're really serious about doing this, yes, please come. And that's how, yeah. And it was after maybe 4 years? ごめんなさい。4年後ぐらいに、独立なさったのは5年。And after, about 5.5 years, she became independent. And now she works independently. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. So the question is about the mountain cherry used for wood blocks. So do people need to grow cherries specifically to harvest tree to create wood blocks?
版木ができるまでに木の育てるというよりも、何十年もかかるものなので、基本的にはあるものを使うんですね。それを切っただけでは使えないので、何十年と置いておいて中の水分を全部乾燥させなきゃいけないんですね。
何十年もかかるんですか？
何十年もかかりますね。本当に完全にやろうとすると何十年かかかってしまうので、だからもうその版木を 切るだけじゃなくてそこから育てるのがまた時間がかかって、で水分が抜けきっていないと、先ほどどのぐらい版木が持つかっていう話をしてたと思うんですけど、一回吸った後に増刷をしないとそのまま置いておくんですけど、木が反っていくんですね。水分をちゃんと抜けきるとそんなに反らないんですけど、木の中の水分が全部抜けきるまでその十数年かかってしまうっていうのがあります。
So it's not that cherry trees are grown to harvest the wood for wood blocks, but what happens is, it's to create wood block. It's not just about cutting down the tree, but it needs to be dried completely. And to dry the wood completely takes 10 plus years. So that is how long it takes to create a wood block. And unless you dry it completely, what happens is once you create one print run, if you are not doing another print run, you will just store the wood block for another occasion. Oh, it went out. Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, thank you. But if you are just storing them and the wood is not fully dry, then it really starts to warp. But once the wood is dried completely, then the wood block will not warp that much. So yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
For selling the prints, do you sell them at like a physical store, an online store, where customers will go to you and like you'll show them and then put them up and people buy them, or is it like a commission-based thing, or is it where you sell them to like cultural stuff like museums or other things along those lines?
ビジネスサイドの質問で、販売をするというのはお店でやるのかオンラインでやるのか、それとも本当に、プライベートに、注文が来たものをやるのか、あとは美術館に購入してもらうのか、どういう感じなんでしょうかっていう質問です。どうぞ。
彫師摺師はあくまで職人で、依頼を受けて彫ったり摺ったりするんですけど、その上にプロデュースをする版元っていうのがいて、そこが基本的には売ったり、美術館に卸すのもそうですし、販売してます。でそれと、今日ご紹介した戦車札はあくまで、個人の趣味でやってるものなので、そういうものに関しては、直接依頼されたりっていうもっと狭いコミュニティでやってるものなので、そういうこともあるんですけど、その版画全体で言えば基本的にはその版元が全てを請け負って、私たちはその板もその刷った紙も全部もう渡してしまうっていう権利は何もないっていう状態です。
So basically there are two avenues. For something like Senjafuda or the votive slip that you saw and you heard a mini lecture on, those are basically private commissions. So you may receive a commission independently or privately and do the work. But for the most part, woodblock printing, it was the case in the early modern period, and it is still the case today, that it's a collaborative project. And you have a so-called a publisher who basically creates jobs or gets commissioned and commission the work to the carver and printer. So the publisher are the ones who get together all the materials and get all the people together and produce the project. And then those are the people who actually sell the final product as well. So what Nagai-san was saying that is the carver and the printer are sort of artisans. So the copyright of the pieces also belong to the publisher. Yeah, go ahead.
What's the longest you've taken on making one woodblock print?
一つのプロジェクトで一番長くかかったのっていうのはどんな？ 虎ですか。そう、虎もでもそんなに長くかな。大きい。
今ご説明した時の浮世絵とかだと、多くても30色っていうふうに言っていたんですけど、現代版画で日本画みたいなものですね、それを版画にしたりすると100何色っていう時があるんですね。それを彫りをやったりすりをやったりするとやっぱり何ヶ月もで、一番かかるのは彫り師の色分けって言って、その絵をどの面にどういうふうに何色やるかっていうのを考えるのが一番大変なので、昔の親方とかは1ヶ月ぐらい睨んでたとか、そういう準備なんからするとやっぱり色数とか多いものが多いですね。
So, so the question was about, what was the project that took the longest? So we mentioned that for the beauty print that is up here, that's 32 colors. For woodblock print, ukiyo-e woodblock print, 30-some colors is the maximum oftentimes. But for something like reproducing painting, like Japanese-style painting using woodblock, printing, that sometimes take hundreds of colors. Then those are the projects that takes the longest, and sometimes they take months. And the part that takes the longest is to figure out the colors, right? So which part will use how many blocks and what will be the color combination to reproduce. So that would be, and sometimes the printer and the cover stare at the painting for a month or something just to decide on a color. Yeah.
How long does it take to do one intricate woodblock?
とっても、緻密な版木を彫るのにどのぐらい時間がかかりますか？
本当ものによるとしか言いようがないので、簡単にここにあるもので言うと、この4色のこれが3日、これが3週間で、これが2ヶ月弱ってとこですね。
So I will, yeah. So just about carving, and so the question was how, if you have like very intricate design, how long does it take to carve? So she wanted to give concrete examples. So she was saying for this small piece that has 何色ですかこれ？4色, 4 colors. This was 3 days. And for the Hokusai Great Wave, that was 3週間, 3 weeks. And for this Yoshitoshi beauty print, this was 2 months. Which is pretty amazing. Yeah. Right?
I have a technical question about it. I don't know the best way to word it, but would they carve textured pieces, like through carving cross-hatching or like stippling, or is it more about making solid blocks of color?
Okay, so ですね. So for instance, your question is about like if you have like Yeah. 技術的な質問なんですけど、例えば、蚊帳みたいのが一番いいかな。蚊帳みたいなのをするときに、こう斜めにいっぱい線があったり、細かい線があるっていうのはどういうふうにやるんですか？線がいっぱいあるのとか、線がこうなんかあっちこっちになってるとか重なってるとか、ちょっとそういうこう込み入った構図っていうのはどういうふうにやるんでしょうか？
基本的には片方の線は通しちゃって、であとはこうツンツンツンツンって彫れるんですけど、やっぱあんまりにも危なそうなところ、こっちとこっちがこう取れちゃいそうなところっていうのはやっぱりもう止めてまた止めて、も 本当その隙間隙間で掘っていくっていう感じですね。
ちょっとかやとかって2つ版木を使うっていうふうにも聞いたんですけど、だから片側で
そうですね。
もう片方
一番ちゃんとしたやり方っていうかまあまあそうですね。チェックぐらいだったらちょぼちょぼ掘るんですけどちょぼちょぼあれなんだっけ、大橋や竹の雨とかですね、ああいうまあもっといいのがあるか、こうクロスが交差があんまりにも多いのは、すりのこと考えた時にも彫りもそうなんですけど、やっぱりこっちとこっちみたいな感じで彫り分けられれば一番ベストですね。
Yeah, so it really depends, but so we're kind of talking about the very intricate patterns, right? So the cover has to think about the printer as well. So if, for instance, if you have like a checkered pattern, if the cross is really large, then you can do one side first and then do a little bit for the other side. But for instance, if you have like a mosquito net, which is really, really intricate, right? So that will be multiple, like 2 blocks for one side and the other side. Otherwise, it's much more difficult to print as well.
I'd like to ask one. So I'm standing over here watching Matsuzaki Oyakata print what is actually a senjafuda. I'm not sure if people are realizing this, but these are ukiyo-e and this is a senjafuda. And I'm curious if maybe Suda-san could tell us why he chose this one, and do we know anything about the people who sponsored this? It looks like it's by a group called the Ichokai. Do we know anything about the Ichokai? Could you tell us a little bit of the background of this particular piece?
今松崎さんが刷っていらっしゃるものについてもう少し教えてください。
はい、先ほど紹介がありました戦車札っていうのはだいたい一丁札、基本がこの大きさです。一丁札です。
Do you want to just go ahead?
So basically, so I'll translate this. So basically, a senjafuda is, they come in units of 1 slip like this. So that's the size, that's the standard size of one votive slip.
で、これが2枚あることによって二丁札。
So if you want to draw a design that's larger than 1 slip, you're still thinking in multiples of 1 slip. So this, for example, is a 2 slip design, but you can always, I'm sort of adding information here, but you can always see the outline of the original frame coming out from behind the image, so you can actually count those and tell this is a 2 slip image.
で、これが
So this is, in fact, it's the same size as a regular ukiyo-e, but in fact, this is an 8 slip senjafuda design. And you can count the little outlines behind it.
これが八丁札という大きさになってだいたい浮世絵と同じ大きさになります。で、先ほど戦車札は個人の遊びだという話をしていましたが、個人個人でこれを作って皆さんに配るという遊びもあれば、大勢が集まってこういうでっかい札を作って、これとは別に名前だけの札もつけて3枚セットで戦者札、みんなで作った戦者札という形になる。
So we sort of mentioned at the outset that this was kind of an individual thing that you might commission a slip, 1 slip maybe with your name or your pseudonym on it. But you could also get together with a group and together commission a larger one like this. So this larger one is actually commissioned by a club of these, and you might get together and do ones with just the name on it. The one in Akiko's left hand is Oregon. It's Mr. Oregon. Or they might have pictorial designs on them.
もう少しこれは今これは何色の？
これは親方。親方。親方。これは何色ですか？これ。
So Akiko's asking how many colors are involved in this one?
はい。12、3色。
12 or 13 colors.
で、基本的に 札会といいますか、その札で遊んでいる方たちが今日本だとどうしても入れ墨っていうとちょっとマイナスなイメージがある方たちなんですけれども、江戸時代はもう全然皆さんと同じようにファッションで入れ墨を入れている感じなので、この絵に関しては稲瀬肌比べといって、入れ墨を比べてこんな俺はいい入れ墨入れてんだぜっていうような絵になっております。
So the pictorial theme of this one is, as you can probably tell, the full body tattoo. And in contemporary Japan, the full body tattoo might not have the most positive associations, but in the Edo period, it was celebrated and people enjoyed, showing off their tattoos. And so the name of this particular design is basically comparing skins, and it's depicting a bunch of tattoo-wearing gentlemen comparing their tattoos with each other. And this was the theme chosen by this particular club of Senja Fuda, or votive slip aficionados. Those of you in some of the classes right now are studying this or will be studying this very soon, so this is good.
顔料について、油ですか、それとも
水性です。
Yeah, it's water-based. Yeah, yeah. ミュ
So for a question for the carver, when you first started learning how to carve, how often did you get hurt? And now as professional, do you still get hurt sometimes with the carving knife?
最初始めた時やっぱりこう手刺しちゃったりとかいっぱいしたんでしょうか。今はどんな感じでしょうか。
最初彫るものって多分他の仕事も共通なんですけど、道具がとにかく大事で、最初って全然切れないので、ほぼ一日研いでる感じ、研いでかけるなので、切れないので、もう無理やり力ずくで彫るんで、なおさら指へのダメージがくる。なので切れる小刀だとスッと入るんで、そんな血も出ないと綺麗に入るみたいな。だけど力ずくでガンってやるんで結構血が出るっていうのは最初の頃ありまして、減りましたけど、いまだにトンカチで親指打ったりとか、なんか落としてそれこそ切れる小刀を落としたりすると、なんか知らない傷できたりというのはしょうがないですね。みんなあると思います。
So this is a painful story. So, for carving and any kind of production, right, it's really about the tool. And for carver, when you're starting, it's actually really hard to carve, right? And you use the tool, the knife, but then you don't know how to carve yet, so you have to put a lot of force into and carve. So then you could slip and you hurt yourself. Or, you break your tool, you break your knife, and then you have to, what is it? Toguってなんだっけ? Sharpen it again, and then you do it again, and you break it, and you sharpen it again. So it's all about that. And when the knife is really, really sharp, even if you cut, you actually don't get too bloody. But when the tool is dull and you are using a lot of force and you cut, then it becomes like, ah! Yeah, so that was the beginning. And even today, I may bang my finger with the hammer sometimes or drop the knife and I get a cut that I didn't realize that I got. So that happens, and that's part of the job.
So we have actually, I had a question from the audience that I was going to relay, and then we'll go over here. Could we maybe explain the kento a little bit, or the key block a little bit? We can see it being used a little bit.
じゃあ剣刀について少し教えてください。
版木には必ず剣刀というマークが2箇所あります。こことここ。
So the question is about the registration mark, and in Japanese it's called kento. And you see in every block, you see two registration mark. So in this case, it's here and here.
こちらがこういう角になっている鍵剣刀。
So this is sort of a hook shaped at the corner.
で、ここが引き付け剣刀と言いまして、紙をここにここがちゃんと彫ってあるんですね。もうすでにここに当てるのではなくて刺す感じなんですね。
So these, you may not be able to see it from afar, but it's got a very shallow indentation. So you're not trying to sort of place necessarily the paper, but you're sliding into these slots.
彫ってあることによって紙がここで動かなくなるので、必ず紙のここの部分に絵がちゃんと来る。このマークの開発によって浮世絵っていう色が何色もその場所に重ねられることによって、この発明によって浮世絵がどんどん成長していったということですね。
So the registration marks, those were actually revolutionary for woodblock printing in Japan. And because of this invention of registration mark in the early Edo period, the woodblock print became multicolor. They're sometimes called the brocade pictures, multicolor. And that's because you place the paper, these registration mark will appear exactly the same location. So for every block, as long as you put your paper at the registration mark, you can print without having a misregistration.
で、先ほども言ったんですけれども、長いこと版木を置いておくとねじれてきたりするので、また増刷ということでまたする時になると見当は絶対に合わないので、ここを直していきます。で、直す時ここの部分とここの部分とここだけなので、もし紙が斜めに置きたい時はここだけに一本木を埋め込むんですね。
So we talked about reprint, and if the first print run is done and you don't do another print run for a while, you will save the woodblock, right? And sometimes the woodblock might warp or twist when you bring it out to do another print run. So if that happens, then the registration mark will be misaligned. So what one would do is to just fix the registration mark so that it is aligned again. And for instance, you are just carving a little bit around the corner, or if you want to if you have to make it a little bit, the paper to go in a little bit diagonally to match the warp, then you might add just a tiny bit of wood into, you carve a little bit and add a wood into it.
Yeah, so keep a watch on Matsuzaki Oyakata because you can see him very smoothly putting the paper into the registration. It's really fascinating to watch. I'm up here looking at it closely, so when it comes up on the screen. I think there's a question.
Thank you. I'm wondering if you can say more about the name card business in Kyoto. You said that for geisha, they usually use this kind of a block print for their name card, and I'm just wondering why. And compared to modern business printing, what's the difference between a woodblock business card and also modern printing business card? And does this also apply to other traditional arts, for example, kabuki or different kind of a rakugo, that kind of thing? That kind of a traditional arts people or actors, they will also use this way to produce their own name card. And what's the contents for geisha's name cards? Of course, names or other kind of decorations or paintings or whatever. I would love to know more about this style. Thank you.
京都の戦車札についての質問なんですけども、京都の芸者さんというのはなんでその 普通の名刺とかではなくて戦車札を好むのかとか、であとはその他の職人さんの方も戦車札を使ったりするんでしょうかということです。
京都の芸者さんが、作っている札っていうのが小札といってこういう形になっているんですね。でこのぐらいの大きさだと自分の旦那衆とか、お知り合いの方に名刺代わりにこういうきれいな色のついたものをあげるとやっぱり印象が良くなっていくので、いろんなデザインのものを皆さん持っていて、で旦那衆とかお知り合いの人に配ってたんですけども、その旦那がそのひいきの芸者さんにこの札を作ってあげるっていうのも一つあって、で旦那さんがひいきにしてちゃんと谷町としてサポートしてあげてっていうのがあるので、これの文化が多分京都の方で流行ったんだと思います。
So it's a lot of it has to do with the social engagement, and so this is the size of the name card that Kyoto geisha in Kyoto would use. So you can see that it's much smaller, and it's easy to carry, but it is also colorful, and each one would come up with their own design. So this will be a very memorable card to distribute to their customers, patrons, and for and there could also be a customer who would offer to create these for the geisha that they're patronizing. So yeah, it's really a nice way to kind of engage. あと他の職業でこういう札を使ってる方っていうのはいるんでしょうかっていう。
落語家さんとか、昔は歌舞伎役者とかもありますけど、基本的にはもう本当趣味なので、いろんな人が。
Yeah, so for in the past, other occupation, right, that used this sort of Sensha Fuda as name card, one could say, for instance, rakugo performer or kabuki actors may have used them. But today it is really more about sort of hobby or one's preference. So in fact, there are quite a few people who use Sensha Fuda as their name card.
Sorry. Is there any specific way you prevent from getting like ink fingerprints on the prints, or do you just like pray or get really good at it?
なんか指紋がついちゃったりとかっていうのは、それはどうやってそうならないようにするんですか？
指紋がつくときは基本的に手が真っ黒の時なので洗います。
So wash one's hand rigorously. Yeah, but so when you get like fingerprint on the print, oftentimes what happens is you have ink all over your finger, right? So that's the only way to prevent it.
でもやっぱりいつついたかわからない絵の具って結構あるので、それを防ぐために検討みといって本番の紙のとは別に安い紙で見当が合ってるかどうかを確かめる紙があるんですけど、それで挟んでなるべくもしもの時のためにまとめた時に結構指紋がつきやすいので、それを防ぐために検討みっていうので挟んでやるようにはしてます。
Yeah, so the other trick that is often used. So before you do the main printing, which you will use very expensive, high quality paper, you do a test print, right, to make sure that the registration mark is matching. And those papers are called kentomi, or the registration checking, and those are cheap paper. So sometimes even if you are washing your hand vigorously, sometimes you have the occasion that you don't realize that you have ink on your hand. So in order to make sure that they don't get transferred onto the finished product, Oftentimes, what printer will do is to use those cheaper paper to hold the complete print so that you're avoiding accidents.
Another one. ちょっとバレンについて聞きたいです。バレンっていうのはどうしてそういう形になっているのか、どういうものから出ているのか、まずは英語で。バレン which is this tool that 松崎親方 is using here. What's it made out of? Why is it this shape? Things like that. お願いします。
バレンの中身なんですけれども、中身は竹革になってます。竹革、マダケは分かりますかね。
Bamboo, sort of peel. What is it? Skin.
Rind, skin, what the outside of bamboo bark, maybe?
バレンの中身の、マダケという種類の、竹が一番ベストなんですけれども、葉っぱの大きさ分かりますかね。このぐらいの長さでこういう形をしてるんですけど、そこの根元の部分だけ、根元ので厚さが同じじゃなきゃいけないので、その部分のさらに半分ぐらい。だ大きいところのもうどのぐらい6分の1ぐらいだけを使って編んでいきます。
So this is actually what is inside that printing pad known as baren in Japanese, and this is a woven basically string, but the material that is used is a particular kind of bamboo. It's madake in Japanese, I don't know the technical term, but it has this very big leaf. But out of those very big leaf, you have to have the same thickness. So you only use just like 1/6 of it. That is at the very core of it. And then once you get the material, you will sort of weave it into these strings.
その6分の1の部分をさらに2ミリですね。2ミリの幅に切って、それをこよって、基本の形がこれですね。
So out of those 1/6 of the leaf, you will cut in strips of about 2 millimeter. What is that in like? Yeah, that. Yeah. And then you will braid it.
6メートル編みます。
For 6 meters.
それをまた半分にしてよります。
And then you will fold it in half, and then you twist it.
で、また半分にしてよります。
And then you fold it in half again, and then you twist again.
そうすると、
マイク持ちます。はい。And this is what you get. Ta-da! Yeah. And then, これを
ぐるぐると。
And then you coil it into basically the shape of the printing pad.
巻いていきます。で、これを12センチ、13センチぐらいになるように巻いていきます。
And you make it into a disc of about 12 centimeters, so maybe about that, well, that big. Yeah.
で、ディスクになったもの、この中に入っているんですけど、この大きさにまで。
So that's inside here, and it has a support. And これもmadakeなんですか？So that's actually madake leaf. So the particular kind of bamboo that is used.
で、これがその大きさになったときに、このつぶつぶ、この酔っていたときに、このつぶつぶができるんですね。
So when you are twisting it, you get all these little bumps.
これで、すり込んで。
And those bumps are really important when you are trying to press in the pigment into the paper.
平らだともうこするだけなので、染み込ませるために力が入るようにこのつぶつぶが。
So if the printing pad is completely flat, the ink will actually not get soaked up by fiber. So these bumpy things is necessary in order to really put force and have the ink get trapped into fiber.
でそれが中身の芯になります。
And that's the core of the printing pad.
でここの黒い部分、この黒い部分は和紙、そこで使っているものではないんですけど、昔の帳面とかに使っていた和紙が一番いいんですけど、薄い和紙で、この丸い形を、30枚ぐらい塗り重ねていくんですけど、それに使うのが柿渋っていうのを柿渋って言って、雑菌もつかないし、防水性もあるしっていう特別な糊を重ねて、1日1枚貼って、乾くのに1日かかるんですね。それを、その30枚で、しかも、ここの真ん中のところが高くなるように小さいのから大きいのまで厚みを変えて貼り込んでいく。
So so that's the core, right? The rope is the core of the printing pad, and on top of that, it seems like a flat disc, but what you have is about 30 thin papers, the kind of very thin paper that used to be used for Edo period, what is it? Like notes and such, and for business, right? So it's a very, very thin paper, and in order to make the center part a little bit indented, it will have 30 paper of different size that is sort of concentric in size. So start with a small one, and then as you get towards the back, it becomes bigger and bigger. And each paper will be pasted onto each other using 柿渋って本当に柿なんですか? Is it? So it's what 渋ってなんだっけ?
Persimmon leaves.
Yeah.
So like kind of essence of squeezed persimmon juice, I think.
Yeah. So that has it prevents molding and also prevents insect damage. And you will use that as glue, and it takes a day to dry. So you will paste one paper each day. So it takes about a month to do this and create the backing disc.
それが完全に乾ききったら、絹ですね。絹を貼って、その上から漆を。
So once that is completely dried, you will paste over a silk, and then you lacquer it. So that's the lacquering that you're seeing.
それが芯の上に重なっていって、それをこの間だけで包んでバレンができます。
And once the disc is done, that will be placed on top of the core, and then you will wrap the whole thing using bamboo leaf, and that's how the printing pad is made.
So we're actually only have about 5 minutes left. So it's been suggested that maybe for the last 5 minutes we let the audience come up and approach again, since you're no doubt really curious to see some of these printed objects now. So please come up and take a look. You look for about 5 minutes and then we'll thank them and finish.